Welcome to Love You a Brunch, the podcast for foodies and those who'd rather be brunching. Hi, I'm Jody Stapler. I am speaking to Martina Slajerova. She is a health and food blogger in the UK, and she is all about the low-carb keto diet, which everybody knows I love so much. So how are you? And tell me how you got started in this, because you have an economics background, don't you?
Oh, yeah, I do. Thank you for having me, by the way.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming.
So years ago, it was in 2011, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's. And that's pretty much how I got into low carb, because I was trying to find ways to feel better. Yeah. Because when I was diagnosed, I was given levothyroxine, which is the medication they give you if you have low thyroid function. But the problem was that I didn't quite see the effects, because I always had the symptoms. I always felt tired. And the best way to describe it is actually that even if you sleep many, many hours, you wake up and you feel like you have a really, really bad hangover.
Yeah, so, I'll tell you, I am very familiar, because I had thyroid cancer 2 years ago. And so they removed my thyroid. And there are times where, especially right after I had it done and I was on levothyroxine, that I would sleep almost 24 hours a day. I'd get up to get my kids on the bus, and I'd get up when they got home. And as soon as I knew that they were safe and everything was good, I could not stay awake, which is one of the reasons I went back to the keto and low carb diet as well.
Oh, yeah. I cannot imagine, to be honest. I don't know how it is to live without a thyroid.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's quite difficult, and it's actually just one of the many symptoms. Because I started gaining weight. I felt hungry all the time. So I was told by my thyroid doctor back then, just, eat less, exercise more, and we're just going to increase the dosage, and you're going to feel better in no time. So they increased the dosage, and I started exercising more, and as a result, I felt more hungry, so I was eating more. So it was just a vicious cycle, and I just felt like this is definitely not the way to do it. There's something wrong going on, and there must be something else I can do. So that's how I got into low carb, because basically the main reason it started making sense for me is that when I switched to low carb, I didn't feel hungry anymore, because finally my blood sugar levels were stable, and I didn't have these hunger issues, and I could sleep better because I woke up and I actually felt refreshed, which was really new to me. Yeah, I just felt so much better. I never stopped taking medication, because that's something that is very unlikely to happen. Definitely in my case, because my thyroid is damaged, and it's very difficult to, if not impossible, to reverse that. Yeah. But I definitely didn't get any worse since then, and my symptoms are just gone, and I feel amazing.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I had done started the low carb keto route, before the thyroid issues, and I lost weight very fast. But this time, after my thyroid was removed, now I take, a natural, thyroid medication called Armour Thyroid, which is like pig thyroid, because levothyroxine just did not work for me. But I find that on keto, I have a hard time even when I'm doing really good on it, losing the weight. Now, granted, I do feel a lot better. I don't get acid reflux as much when I'm doing keto. The sleep thing is not an issue, but I do get stuck on weight, which then just discourages me. How do you stick with it?
So I think it's a very common issue, and we are all so different, and there is no one way that would just work magically for everyone. So I wish there was.
Yeah.
But some people do struggle, and I think the fact that you have your thyroid removed must be very likely the main reason. And I mean, there are so many factors that affect weight loss, and they often go beyond just the diet. So you may have to look into other factors to see if there is something else. Stress is a huge factor. Exercise, because too much exercise, like in my case, could be actually counterproductive. Pollution, toxins, food in general, not just the macros, but also the micronutrient values. So it's not an easy thing. And I think in the long term, we always end up doing something more individualized, something that works for us and may not work for other people. But it's always fine tuning. I mean, even in my case, it took some trial and error. And for example, I realized I cannot eat any gluten, which is not a surprise, to be honest, because with Hashimoto's, gluten is an issue. Soy is an issue, and legumes. So some people can do peanuts on keto because they are very low in carbs, but I cannot, because the moment I eat them, I actually tested that with my antibodies. They just go up. So I have to avoid legumes, including peanuts. And I do have a feeling that I have a problem with dairy too. So although I don't exclude dairy completely, I try to limit it to just minimum. If I don't snack on cheese, I just use it in recipes, and I try to be very considerate with the amounts.
Yeah. Well, I do love in your cookbook that you really have hit all the things that I crave when I'm, especially that time of the month. You know, when you start really craving those things that you really shouldn't have, like you have chewy pumpkin and chocolate chip cookies, and of course the cinnamon buns. That, you know, for some reason, cinnamon rolls are what I crave all the time when I'm starting to crave something. Yeah. And you've hit all that in this cookbook. There are all the things that you would think, oh, I can't have that. But because of the way that you're making it, you can have it on a keto diet, which is great. Yeah. What's the difference between like, the recipes in here as far as like the cinnamon roll as opposed to what you would make when you're not on keto?
So the cinnamon rolls I make, there are two main substitutions if I put it generally. So the first one is that instead of regular flour, I would use low carb alternatives, and that could be anything from almond flour, coconut flour, flax meal in some cases. Although I don't think I used it in this recipe. When it comes to sugar, it's very easy to substitute it, because you just use stevia or erythritol or monk fruit. Those are probably the top sweeteners I would recommend, because they don't cause issues in most people. They tolerate them well. They don't spike your blood sugar. So although it's sweeteners, I would always suggest, to use them in moderation, because they can cause cravings. They can stall weight loss. And sometimes when you feel like you cannot lose weight, it's actually a good idea to avoid sweeteners for a few weeks. See if it makes a difference.
But okay, so I'm looking here, and you also have a way to make chocolate, and that's one thing I honestly had no idea I could make that at home. That would be keto, and I went through it and thinking, oh, okay, well, I probably have to go buy something, but I pretty much have everything in my house to make that. The unsweetened cocoa that you use in baking, the coconut oil, it's pretty easy according to this recipe.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you can use different ways to make chocolate. I think I have three recipes for that in my Fat Bombs book. And one of them is you can either part substitute or fully substitute the cacao butter with coconut oil, or you can use cocoa powder for the chocolate, or you can use cocoa paste, which is the unsweetened cocoa mass that you can. It's basically like 100% chocolate. So there is no sugar in it.
Yeah. So you don't want to eat that on its own.
There are many ways.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the stuff that when you're a kid and you find it in the cupboard and you go, oh, there's chocolate, and you take a bite and it's not chocolate.
Oh, no. Yeah. Actually, you know what's funny, but I couldn't eat it when I started keto because I had a sweet tooth. I loved things very sweet. But over time, I realized that I find things to be too sweet for me. So I ended up using probably about a quarter of the recommended sweetener in recipes because I just find them too sweet. And I think that's because your palate adjusts and you don't crave the sugar. So that's quite amazing. And I could finally enjoy 100% chocolate. And I actually liked it. So
wow.
It's really new to me because I was always the milk chocolate person, and then suddenly I just love 100% chocolate.
Yeah, well, so, I am a complete.
Palate will definitely change.
Yeah, I have a big time sweet tooth. I really do, and I don't mind. I mean, I love potatoes, but I don't mind cutting those out. I can find things that work in their place. Like cauliflower and things like that. But for some reason, I really have a hard time with desserts. I used to own a bakery, so that tells you how much I love desserts. But I do have a hard time finding a sweetener that I like. I noticed that your cookbook has and I've noticed this a lot in the last couple, probably in the last year or so, that a lot of people that are cooking keto are using Swerve. Now, what's the difference between Swerve and the rest? I've never tried Swerve.
So I think I like erythritol, but some people prefer Swerve because it tastes closer to sugar, and it doesn't have that strong cooling effect. It still does a bit because it's erythritol based, but apart from erythritol, there is also fructooligosaccharides. Which is something that kind of makes the cooling effect less obvious, and it tastes closer to sugar, and it can also be substituted just like sugar. So if you have a cup of sugar somewhere in a recipe, you can just use a cup of Swerve, while if you use erythritol, it's about 70% as sweet as sugar. So if you do like things to be sweet, you will have to add a little bit more than you would if you were to use sugar.
Okay.
So the only disadvantage, personally for me, because I live in the UK, it's not easy to get Swerve in the UK. So in most cases, I just use erythritol or liquid stevia or monk fruit sweetener. These are actually my favorite, but mostly I use erythritol.
Yeah. I definitely will have to try Swerve and see if that, and monk fruit, I haven't tried that either. So I'd like to try them both, because it is hard to find something. Yeah.
The only problem is that, it's similar to, stevia-based sweeteners. Okay. So if you find, liquid monk fruit or liquid stevia, you have to really make sure that you don't use too much because it can become so sweet that it actually becomes bitter. So it's not a pleasant taste, and if you use too much, it's always better to use less of this, and maybe part substitute with Swerve or erythritol. If you use just stevia, it may be too strong. In a way.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind. So seriously, this cookbook has every single thing that I crave, like the tortillas. I'm not a bread person, but tortillas, I could eat tortillas with every meal. And of course you can't on keto unless you're making it like in your cookbook. So that's awesome. There's three different versions of the tortillas in your cookbook. And is that something is that something that, like, if I wanted to, I could eat every day? Or do you think it would be...
I don't think there is one answer to this. It depends if you really, really crave it and you want to eat it every day, I wouldn't think it's a good idea, because it may mean that you may end up eating more. Because if you really, really like something, it's similar with sweeteners. I have that with bread. So I make tortillas, or there is a recipe for keto buns, which is like a hamburger bun, and it's really close to bread. I do make these maybe once every 2 weeks, but I try not to make them too often, because they are very easy to just, keep eating. And it's not so much the bread, it's what you eat with it. And then you end up eating more because you just like it so much. Yeah. So I think when it comes to foods you really crave, if you find that, you end up eating more than you should, it's better not to have them every single day. Same with sweeteners, same with bread. But definitely it's a good option if you crave bread. It doesn't mean that you should be too worried. Just a little bit cautious not to have too much of it. Yeah.
Well, you definitely have the book set up so that you can have like your breakfast, your lunch, and your dinner. It's separated by meals, so it really is a keto all day book. With someone that is just starting out, what advice do you give them?
Based on my own experience, I think the number one advice, if I wish someone gave it to me, was make sure you get enough electrolytes. Because I didn't know anything about electrolyte deficiency, and I had all the symptoms like headaches and muscle cramps, and I woke up in the middle of the night and my heart was just pumping, and I thought, my God, this diet must be so bad for me because it must be all the fat I'm eating. And in fact, it was just the fact that I didn't have enough magnesium and potassium, and I was never using too much salt. So that's why I had the headaches, and I was deficient in magnesium, and I had the muscle cramps for that. So it's really good to make sure you get plenty of these. And the best foods for that are salmon, avocados, spinach, bone broth, any greens, broccoli, cauliflower, aubergine, eggplant in the US. So that's definitely the most important thing. And then I would also recommend taking magnesium supplements, because even with the foods that are high in electrolytes, I found that I still didn't get enough magnesium. So that's I think the most important part.
Yeah, well, and you do have a drink in this book, the Raspberry Electrolyte Lemonade, which sounds great, looks great, and I'm always seeing people on social media recommending to find an electrolyte type of drink, and so this is perfect for that.
Definitely, it's probably the easiest way to fix any keto flu symptoms, and it's not just for the beginning of when you start following a ketogenic diet. I would say anytime it's good to just make sure you get plenty of electrolytes, because they are often deficient, especially if you like certain foods and you like to have you like to have them often. You may end up with deficiencies simply because you don't have a variety of foods. Yeah. And I do that sometimes myself, because when I'm really busy, I would just cook food in batches, and then I would eat the same thing for 4 days because I don't have time to cook. So when I do, I just drink my electrolyte drink, or I would take magnesium every single day.
Yeah. When I'm searching things online, a lot of times they'll tell me, like, I read things that'll say, like, when people are complaining, I'm really hungry, I don't know what to do. And people always say, well, eat a fat bomb, eat this bomb or whatever. What exactly do they mean by that? And why is that helpful?
So, when it comes to hunger issues, I think generally the best approach, first of all, is to check, do I get enough protein? Because it doesn't necessarily have to be the fat. And in fact, you may get plenty of fat, but you may not get enough protein. And that's very common to be the main issue for hunger. And the second nutrient, macronutrient, is fat. So I would first say look at protein and then fat. So if you're hungry, you may want to add a bit more protein in your diet. You could use fat bombs. They are basically, it could be a sweet or a savory snack that is usually very, very high in fat. So you would have about 90% fat, calories from fat, and then very little carbs, and then the rest would be protein. It's a good thing to have maybe if you don't have time to cook and you just want to have something quickly when you're hungry. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for weight loss because it can be counterproductive. Because it's so low in protein, you may end up eating too much fat and not enough protein. So it's more for convenience, post-workout, pre-workout, quick snack. Definitely not something I would eat every single day.
Okay. And more for people that are just in maintenance, maybe?
I think maintenance, even weight loss, it always depends on the overall intake. It always depends on what else they eat on that day. But fat bombs are also, could be good for people who follow the ketogenic diet for therapeutic purposes. So people who use it to manage epilepsy, for example.
Yeah.
Because they need to get their fat intake really, really high, especially if they follow the classic ketogenic diet. And fat bombs can be really useful for them.
Okay. Okay, so you have like a bunch of sauces in the back. Is this a nut butter that you have here? And chocolate barbecue sauce. Ooh, that sounds amazing. And then, of course, bone broth.
Trust me.
Yeah. And bone broth, which is, of course, a big thing in diets in the last couple years. Everybody's talking about bone broth and how great it is for you. And a lot of people don't know that they can make this at home. So I love that you have the recipe here. What is the importance of bone broth these last couple years? And where do you think everybody got this? All of a sudden they realize this is good stuff.
So bone broth, one of the ways to use it, just to drink it, or you can add it to any recipes. You can make soups from it. So it's high in collagen, which is good for your gut. And for us with autoimmune issues, this is the best thing you can have because it has really great effects on your gut. And it can be a great option for those who want to get some sodium in and have been dealing with keto flu again. So even having a cup of bone broth every day can really help. And yeah, I mean, I make it probably every other week, and I just make a large batch and then freeze it in freezer bags and use it for cooking in general. And the way I do it is that I collect bones from roasts or from anything else I make. I never waste the bones. I just collect them in the freezer. And this is a great way to actually make bone broth and use every bit of the animal you can, so you don't waste anything.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I honestly didn't think about that. I mean, I always do it after like a big meal, like where I'm making a turkey or something like that. I save them and make the bone broth, but I didn't even think to save the bones from the rest of the week that you're using in regular meals.
I do that all the time.
Yeah. You have some great recipes in here. You have the Kung Pao chicken, which, I love, coq au vin, tiramisu, ice bombs. You have, Boston cream pie. See, you can see where my mind's going. I go to all the sweets. But also I saw the granola, and that's something I've missed because I've not been using. I thought you couldn't, I didn't think about making granola with things that weren't oats and things like that. So what is in the granola that you guys that you make in here?
So it depends on the recipe. The absolute easiest one that I make is I just use unsweetened coconut chips, flaked coconut, then flaked almonds, and I would roast them in the oven with some coconut oil and cinnamon, maybe add some chocolate chips after baking. And that's my very simple cereal kind of recipe. And when I make granola, I would use a mixture of nuts and seeds, part blend them in the food processor. And then I would add an egg white, sweetener, although it's not necessary, it's optional. If you like cinnamon or vanilla or even berries, and you just bake everything in the oven at low temperature, and you end up with really nice crunchy granola, and you would never really know that there are no oats in there.
Yeah, I'm excited to try that because I do love granola, and that is something that I miss since being on this diet. So, and I really shouldn't call it a diet. I guess you should call it a way of life. But it is hard when you enjoy things that aren't kind of allowed on the keto diet to keep yourself from it. But it is much healthier. That's for sure. So what would you say is your favorite go-to recipe in your book?
Do you mean the last one?
Yeah.
Oh my God, there are so many. But I think anything that has to do with Greek food, so any Greek recipe, or I have a few Czech-inspired recipes. This book actually contains my Slovak sauerkraut soup, which I absolutely love because I grew up eating it. Greek avko lemono, which is also a soup, but I'm not quite sure if it's in the last cookbook, to be honest. It could be in my previous cookbook.
Right, because you have like 5 books, right?
Yes, this one is actually the 6th one. So I do get confused sometimes about where each recipe is.
Yeah. Well, so are all your cookbooks very similar to this one, where I can find very similar type of item? Like I said, this cookbook has like everything that I usually crave. So are all your cookbooks based in this way?
I would say some of them are a bit specific because one of them is a keto slow cooker and 1-pot meals book. One of them is a fat bombs cookbook, so you would find any sweet and savory fat bombs. And then there is a book that is for quick keto meals under 30 minutes. And then there is a keto beginners where I tried to include electrolyte-rich recipes, especially for the initial phase of the ketogenic diet, as well as easier recipes. So they're not too complicated, not too difficult to start with. And the book, the last one, the 6th cookbook, the Keto All Day, is actually it's a cookbook that contains many of the recipes that are in my previous cookbooks, plus about 20 brand new. So it's like a compilation of the best recipes that I handpicked from each one of the cookbooks.
Perfect.
And then I added a few new.
Yeah.
So,
well, I love it. I love the book, and I'm so happy that people like you are making cookbooks for those of us who are trying to be keto and find it difficult. So thank you so much for that. Where can people?
Thank you for your kind words.
Yeah, where can people find you and find your books?
So my books are available in most major bookstores. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other major bookstores. And it's not just in the US, it's also in the UK, Australia. The Keto Beginners Cookbook has actually been published in Czech, which is my first language. So I was excited to see that.
Yeah, that is exciting.
And my father can actually finally read my cookbooks because he wasn't able until now. So yeah, that's really cool. And apart from the cookbooks, I have an Instagram profile, KetoDiet_up. People can find me on Facebook, Twitter. I have a YouTube channel where I post quick 1-minute recipes.
Oh, and what is that? Is that under your name?
Yes, again, so it's a KetoDiet_up.
Okay.
The YouTube channel. So you can find many quick recipes. in there. And there is actually, it doesn't mean that the recipe takes a minute to make, but it's just speeded up for simplicity.
Yeah.
And one of the most popular recipes is actually a bread recipe. And the other one has to do with chocolate. So I can kind of see that, the most popular recipes are always
right.
Same as mine, by the way.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's awesome. I'm so glad that you have so many ways for everybody to get a hold of you. And I'm going to link those in my show notes so that everybody can find you easily. And this book is Keto All Day. And like I said, I'm loving it, and I hope everybody else does too. And do you have any plans do you ever get over to the U.S.?
I do actually. I'll be in the US in about a month, and I'm planning to travel through California because I love it there. I've been there just once, and I'm going to visit a good friend of mine and kind of do a quick trip. So probably for a couple of weeks. So I can't wait, really.
Yeah, nice. Do you do any kind of book signings when you're here or anything like that?
I haven't scheduled anything yet, but I'll let you know if I do, because
Absolutely.
This was so quick. It was a completely unexpected trip. So yeah. I'll see if I can schedule anything in.
Yeah, let me know if you do, and then I'll also make that announcement on the podcast so that people can come out and see you if they can. Very good.
Thank you so much.
Yes, well, thank you for joining me, and thank you so much for this wonderful cookbook.
Thank you for having me.
I want to thank Martina for joining us today and telling us all about her new book, The Keto All Day Cookbook. More than 100 low-carb recipes that let you stay keto for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I also want to thank you for joining me today. Please make sure, if you like our podcast, to subscribe wherever you're listening and join us on our Facebook page, Instagram, and Twitter, and share us with your family and friends. If you appreciate our podcasts, books, music, and our goal of helping others fulfill their artistic career dreams, and would like to see it continue for many years to come, please join our Patreon and become a sponsor at Willow Moon Publishing. If you have any suggestions, feel free to leave a comment or email me at loveyouabrunchpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much again. I'm Jody Stapler, and join us next week on Love You a Brunch.